They once held absolute power inside the camps, but when the Reich collapsed, the SS women guards faced a brutal fate at the hands of Allied forces. If you value documented World War II history like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also, comment from which city you're hearing this from. Now back to the story. Behind uniforms, power carried both privilege and moral peril. Female SS guards, known as Aufseherinnen, occupied a unique position in the Nazi concentration camp system. They were recruited from towns and cities across Germany and occupied territories, often young women seeking steady employment, adventure, or social advancement. For the audience, suspense is immediate. How did ordinary women come to wield authority in one of history's most notorious systems? The tension lies in the stark contrast between youthful ambition and the harsh realities of war. Training was rigorous and ideologically driven. Recruits underwent indoctrination emphasizing loyalty to the SS, racial hierarchy, and the absolute obedience expected within the camp system. Drill exercises, administrative instruction, and supervised oversight of prisoners prepared them for the daily exercise of power. Viewers are drawn into curiosity and moral reflection as they imagine the transformation from civilian life to roles enforcing cruelty and order. Responsibilities varied depending on rank and assignment. Guards oversaw labor, punished prisoners, and maintained camp discipline. They were expected to monitor prisoner behavior, report infractions, and sometimes participate in more direct acts of intimidation or violence. The audience experiences suspense and engagement as these duties are explored, illustrating how power was normalized and enforced even among women, whose participation was rarely acknowledged in broader narratives of the Holocaust. Interactions with prisoners were a critical component of daily life. Some guards adhered strictly to rules and routine. Others embraced brutality, using fear and punishment to maintain control. Anecdotes from survivor testimonies reveal a spectrum of behavior, highlighting the choices available even within rigid structures. The audience is emotionally invested as they confront the tension between agency and systemic pressure. How much of the cruelty was commanded, and how much was willingly executed? The social environment of the camp reinforced authority and conformity. Guards lived within a hierarchical community, subject to scrutiny by senior officers and peer pressure. Camaraderie, competition, and fear of reprisal shaped behavior, and deviation could result in punishment or demotion. Suspense and curiosity are heightened as viewers consider the pressures that encouraged compliance and amplified the moral stakes of every decision. Ultimately, the rise to power of female SS guards illustrates the intersection of ambition, ideology, and systemic cruelty. The audience is drawn into a complex narrative, balancing historical understanding with moral inquiry. Suspense, reflection, and empathy are maintained throughout as viewers examine how ordinary individuals could become enforcers within a machinery of oppression. By understanding their recruitment, training, responsibilities, and interactions with prisoners, the stage is set for the dramatic collapse of authority that would follow at the war's end, preparing viewers for the profound consequences that history would impose. The empire crumbled, and the once untouchable faced the consequences. As Allied forces advanced across occupied territories, the power that female SS guards once wielded disintegrated almost overnight. Towers that had enforced discipline over prisoners now loomed over empty courtyards. Barracks lay abandoned, and the very symbols of authority, the uniforms, insignia, and badges became relics of a vanishing regime. For viewers, suspense is immediate. How do those who once commanded fear navigate a world that no longer obeys? Initial detainment was chaotic and unpredictable. Some guards were captured by Allied troops, others by local resistance groups or civilian mobs seeking retribution. The sudden shift from enforcer to prisoner created an intense psychological dissonance. Those accustomed to control over life and death now faced interrogation, confinement, and the threat of punishment. Emotional engagement is heightened as the audience imagines the shock, confusion, and fear experienced by women who had never before been on the receiving end of power. camp hierarchies dissolved rapidly. Senior officers were arrested, and mid-level guards were left without guidance, forcing them to navigate survival in a landscape dominated by victors. The audience experiences suspense as they witness these women confronted with the stark reversal of fortune. Every decision could influence whether they survived, were imprisoned, or faced trial. The precariousness of their position underscores the fragility of authority rooted in systemic violence. Encounters with Allied forces were tense and fraught with uncertainty. Guards were questioned, sometimes harshly, about their duties, complicity, and knowledge of atrocities. Some attempted to downplay involvement, conceal identity, or feign ignorance. The audience is drawn into curiosity and reflection. Could self-preservation erase culpability? Or would history demand accountability? Each response, hesitation, and observation became a thread in the unfolding narrative of justice. In many cases, the transition from power to vulnerability was compounded by societal backlash. Communities that had witnessed, endured, or survived the camps responded with hostility, disdain, or outright aggression. Guards were often isolated, stigmatized, or escorted under armed supervision through towns that once feared them. Suspense and moral reflection are maintained as viewers consider the tension between fear, anger, and the principles of due process, highlighting the ethical complexities of post-war justice. Ultimately, the end of control illustrates the collapse of an imposed hierarchy, the fragility of systemic violence, and the psychological upheaval faced by those once in positions of absolute authority. Suspense, empathy, and reflection are sustained as viewers confront the reversal of power dynamics, anticipating the legal, moral, and historical consequences that await. By exploring initial detainment, exposure to Allied forces, and the breakdown of authority, the stage is set for subsequent trials, punishments, and historical reckoning, keeping the audience engaged in both moral and historical inquiry. Under the weight of truth, confessions revealed chilling details. Female SS guards, once figures of authority and fear, now faced the scrutiny of Allied interrogators. Arrests were often abrupt and jarring. Soldiers, military police, and investigators surrounded the camps and towns where these women had exercised control, demanding explanations for their actions. For viewers, suspense is immediate. What secrets would be exposed, and how would the women respond under pressure? Interrogation procedures were methodical. All eyes sought to understand the extent of each guard's involvement in atrocities, from oversight of forced labor to participation in punishments or executions. Women were questioned on daily routines, command structures, and knowledge of broader crimes. Emotional engagement is heightened as audiences imagine the psychological pressure. Formerly empowered individuals confronting a world where every word, hesitation, and admission could determine freedom or punishment. Many guards struggled with fear and denial. Some minimized involvement, claiming routine duties or obedience to orders. Others attempted to shift blame onto superiors or colleagues. Investigators meticulously cross-referenced statements with prisoner testimonies, camp records, and photographic evidence, creating a web of accountability that left little room for evasion. Curiosity and tension are maintained as viewers anticipate the unraveling of fabricated narratives under relentless scrutiny. The interrogation process also exposed moral and psychological dilemmas. Some women expressed remorse, while others remained ideologically committed even in captivity. These contrasting attitudes provided insight into human adaptability and moral reasoning under extreme circumstances. Audience engagement is sustained through moral reflection. How do individuals reconcile obedience, indoctrination, and personal conscience when confronted with justice? Confessions often revealed previously unknown details about camp operations, prisoner treatment, and instances of brutality. Testimonies from surviving prisoners corroborated or contradicted statements, adding layers of suspense and ethical complexity. Viewers are drawn into empathy, horror, and moral contemplation as they navigate the interplay between personal survival, societal judgment, and historical truth. In some cases, interrogations extended over days or weeks. Psychological strain, uncertainty about fate, and constant monitoring heightened stress. Investigators documented demeanor, emotional responses, and inconsistencies, compiling comprehensive reports to inform trial proceedings. The audience experiences suspense and anticipation, witnessing the meticulous nature of post-war justice as well as the human consequences of prior authority. Ultimately, the process of capture and interrogation highlighted the collapse of power, the emergence of accountability, and the complexity of individual responsibility within a system of organized brutality. Suspense, empathy, and reflection are maintained as viewers see the transformation from feared enforcer to vulnerable defendant, preparing them for the subsequent examination of sentences, confinement, and societal reckoning. Justice arrived, though uneven, leaving lasting consequences. Once the interrogations concluded, female SS guards faced sentencing that reflected both the gravity of their actions and the complex post-war landscape. Some were immediately transferred to detention facilities, where confinement replaced authority, and the routines of command were replaced by regimentation under watchful Allied eyes. Suspense is immediate for viewers. How would women accustomed to control adapt to their new reality? Prison sentences varied according to involvement, rank, and available evidence. Guards directly implicated in atrocities or identified through survivor testimony often received long-term incarceration. Labor assignments within these facilities were common, ranging from menial work to tasks that reinforced the consequences of prior cruelty. Audience engagement is sustained as viewers consider the reversal of fortune. Women who once instilled fear now toiled under surveillance, subjected to the structure they once enforced. Societal ostracism compounded the punishment. Communities where atrocities had occurred were acutely aware of the guards' prior authority. Even after release, women frequently faced suspicion, exclusion, and the burden of notoriety. Emotional engagement arises as the audience imagines the psychological toll of public scorn and isolation, forcing reflection on the long-term effects of moral culpability and social judgment. The physical and psychological conditions of confinement were deliberately designed to reflect accountability. Facilities often operated under strict routines, with limited freedoms, minimal comforts, and constant monitoring. Women had time to contemplate their actions, confront their role in systemic violence, and endure the consequences of obedience to immoral orders. Curiosity and suspense remain high as viewers explore the tension between justice, human resilience, and the morality of punishment. Some guards attempted to appeal sentences or mitigate outcomes by cooperating with authorities, sharing information about peers, or demonstrating remorse. These actions sometimes reduced sentences, but could also generate tension within detention facilities as prisoners navigated distrust and suspicion. The audience is drawn into intrigue and moral reflection. How did individual choices, honesty, or strategy influence outcomes in the shadow of historical atrocities? Historical records emphasize that consequences were rarely uniform. Some women received relatively lenient treatment due to insufficient evidence, societal biases, or administrative discretion. Others faced harsher outcomes, particularly those implicated in extreme brutality or systemic abuse. Suspense and intellectual engagement persist as viewers recognize the uneven application of justice and the ethical questions inherent in post-war adjudication. Ultimately, sentences and confinement illustrate the profound reversal of power and the enduring moral reckoning faced by female SS guards. Emotional engagement, curiosity, and reflection are maintained as audiences witness the intersection of justice, historical memory, and personal accountability. By examining the immediate and long-term consequences of participation in atrocities, this section prepares viewers for the final chapter on legacy, memory, and the broader societal lessons drawn from these women's fates. Their names survived in records, a testament to accountability and warning. Female SS guards, once agents of terror in concentration camps, left a complex historical footprint that historians and scholars continue to examine. Archival documents, trial transcripts, and survivor testimonies collectively preserve the memory of these women's actions. offering insight into the moral, psychological, and social dynamics of their roles. For viewers, suspense and curiosity arise as they learn how ordinary individuals became instruments of extraordinary cruelty, and how history meticulously documented their deeds. Documentary filmmakers and historians have worked to reconstruct the daily lives, routines, and choices of these guards. Footage, photographs, and recorded interviews with survivors provide vivid evidence of their authority and the consequences of their actions. Audiences are drawn into both horror and reflection, observing the meticulous effort taken to ensure that these women's stories are neither forgotten nor sanitized. The tension lies in contrasting the mundane aspects of daily camp management with the extraordinary cruelty that marked their positions of power. Survivor testimonies are central to understanding the historical record. Former prisoners recount moments of fear, resilience, and observation, documenting both overt brutality and subtle forms of cruelty. Some stories reveal acts of unexpected leniency, while others detail calculated punishment and intimidation. For the audience, this fosters moral engagement and emotional empathy. As viewers navigate the spectrum of human behavior under coercive systems and the complexities of personal responsibility, trials and legal documentation further solidify the historical record. Arrests, interrogations, and courtroom proceedings created extensive evidence of actions, decisions, and complicity. These records, now preserved in archives across Europe, serve as enduring proof of accountability and a lens through which scholars analyze systemic injustice. Suspense and intellectual curiosity are maintained as viewers recognize the intersection of law, ethics, and memory. Understanding how these mechanisms shape both historical narrative and societal judgment. Historical accounts also explore the broader societal impact of these women's roles. Exhibitions, books, and educational materials examine their participation in the machinery of genocide, emphasizing the ethical lessons learned and the societal need to remember. Emotional engagement is sustained as viewers reflect on how collective memory preserves moral lessons and ensures that the atrocities committed are neither diminished nor repeated. Ultimately, the historical record highlights the duality of remembrance, factual documentation, and moral reflection. By examining photographs, survivor accounts, and trial evidence, viewers gain a comprehensive understanding of the consequences of obedience, ideology, and power. Suspense, curiosity, and ethical contemplation are maintained throughout, preparing the audience for the final section, which examines lessons, societal repercussions, and the enduring legacy of these women. The past teaches what must never be repeated. The fate of female SS guards offers enduring lessons about morality, obedience, and the consequences of complicity in systems of oppression. Their actions, once unchecked by law or conscience, became subjects of scrutiny and reflection in post-war society. For viewers, suspense arises from understanding how ordinary individuals contributed to extraordinary cruelty, and curiosity is sustained by exploring how these events inform ethical thought today. Societal lessons are profound. Communities, historians, and educators have examined the consequences of indoctrination, hierarchical pressure, and normalized violence. These cases illustrate how ordinary people, when embedded within authoritarian structures, can participate in atrocities. Audiences engage intellectually and emotionally, contemplating the tension between obedience and personal responsibility, and the cost of moral disengagement. Ethical considerations extend beyond history. By studying the behavior of these women, viewers confront universal questions about human behavior under authority. How far can ideology justify action? How should individuals respond when confronted with systemic injustice? How does society hold actors accountable when complicity is widespread? Suspense and moral reflection are maintained as audiences grapple with these dilemmas. Considering the contemporary relevance of historical examples, the mechanisms of accountability after the war trials, imprisonment, and societal ostracism highlight both the successes and limitations of justice. Some guards were sentenced according to documented atrocities, Others faced lighter consequences due to lack of evidence, bias, or administrative limitations. For the audience, curiosity is piqued by the inconsistencies, prompting reflection on fairness, the rule of law, and the enduring challenge of ethical governance in post-conflict societies. Psychologically, the repercussions for the guards themselves illustrate the interplay of guilt, fear, and reflection. Detainment and trial expose them to confrontation with their own choices, fostering remorse or defiance. Audience engagement deepens as viewers explore the human response to accountability, the burden of moral reckoning, and the long-term effects of confronting one's actions in historical and societal context. The broader societal impact also resonates. Lessons drawn from the behavior of female SS guards inform education, historical scholarship, and ethical policy making. They remind society of the dangers of systemic dehumanization, ideological indoctrination, and the abdication of personal moral responsibility. Suspense and reflection are maintained as viewers connect historical events with contemporary issues, considering the relevance of vigilance, empathy, and ethical courage in modern contexts. Ultimately, the legacy of these women underscores the importance of remembrance, moral reflection, and ethical accountability. By engaging with their stories, viewers are invited to consider the consequences of action and inaction, the responsibilities of individuals within systems of power, and the enduring imperative to uphold justice and humanity. Suspense, curiosity, and intellectual engagement persist, leaving the audience with lasting reflection on the intersection of history, ethics, and collective memory.